Nail by Ian Jones and Andy Edwards. Episode 3. The Allotment. Tuesday, April the 26th, 1938. Nail has offered to help Claude on his allotment. He's got something on his mind, but is unsure whether to tell Claude about his father and Mrs. Cooper. Oh, it's a bit colder today. I stand on the step of Mrs. Cooper's house for a few seconds before I knock. The brass horse head knocker feels familiar between my fingers and my thumb, heavy and cold. There's no answer. I could use the key tied to the string hanging inside the door. It's still there, no doubt. 18 months since Mrs. Cooper passed on. Not that much has changed, really, except Claude is living in the big house now. She left it to him. Made sense, I suppose. I don't bother going in. I know where he'll be. So I walked a few yards down Bridge Street, then up Bell Passage, past the pub, and into the allotments. I see Nosey Owens, the postman, on his way home after his round. Knows everybody's business, does Nosey, and doesn't mind sharing it. "Good day, Nosey," I say. "Good day, Mr. Ackman," he says. "Have you heard about Mrs. Prothero?" "Nah," I say sharply, "and I don't want to know." I walk on briskly. Nosy old sod he is. The allotment is like a scene from an abandoned Klondike gold mining town. Rusty tin shanties, crooked wooden sheds, a few with glass windows, most with planks of wood nailed across the window frames. Patches of well-tended land set out neat and tidy, some neater and tidier than others. Raised beds, lines of bean sticks, and potato furrows full of horse manure and comfrey leaves keeping the seed potatoes safe. A dirty beige duffel coat stuffed scarecrow with straw hair and sticks for arms stands guard over the crops. A pigeon sits on the scarecrow's head and surveys its larder. Fat lot of good that's doing, I think. At the far end of the allotments I can see Tom Slob, lying on the floor, weeding his cold frame. A lazy bugger, huh? Who weeds lying down, for goodness sake, huh? Claude's wooden shed sits framed between two beech trees. It almost looks like part of the trees. Meant to be there, you know. The trees have been there so long they've started to grow together, intertwined and contorted like the Wesley beeches. Claude is sitting inside his shed on an upturned bucket, warming his hands over the paraffin heater that he's just fired up. He's been clearing weeds and digging a bed for the onion sets, which are keeping warm on the windowsill in his kitchen. Busy time in the garden now. Lots to get ready before the real planting starts. Leeks, peas, broad beans and onions. They'll all have to go in over the next few weeks. Radishes are already in, perfectly aligned in rows like infantrymen. Claude's shoulder is aching from digging, so he's having 5. A small primer stove is warming the water for his tea in an old saucepan, and his feet are tucked under the blankets that he lays over the potato furrows at night in case of a late frost. You were right there, Claude, I say as I walk along the turfed path towards the open door of the shed. God, Hobart, you shook me, man. I was miles away, he says. Just having a minute by you in the warm. Do you want a cuppa? Lovely, I say. He takes a slice of Tysian lap from his pocket. Do you fancy a bit of cake, Niall? There's a bit too much nutmeg in it for me, but it's not bad. No, you're all right, Claude. Just had a talk of bread and dripping before I came out. The saucepan boils, and soon we are drinking hot, sweet tea from army issue enamel mugs. I sit down on a log at the doorway to the shed. You probably won't remember, Hobart, but during the war, the Women's Land Army came to help on the allotments. Worked damn hard, they did. Didn't think women could dig before that. No work for a woman, really, but better than the munitions factory, I suppose. At least you're out in the fresh air. Hard times, I say. My mother worked in the munitions, long hours, dangerous work with all that TNT about. Lots of accidents. 2 girls died there once, she told me. Blown up they were. We had a few conchies here as well one year, says Claude. Conscientious objectors, you know. Too scared to fight. Blooming cowards. Should have shot them all, if you ask me. Still, at least they could carry a spade, even if they were too weak to carry a gun. I don't really agree with Claude's point of view, but I don't say anything. It was hard, Hobart, he goes on, with the rationing, you know. Those Bosch, those German submarines played havoc with food supplies. Tell you what, though, we pulled together. Made things last, you know. No one starved, I can tell you that. He pauses and looks down into his teacup. It's coming again, Hobart. You mark my words. Between what's happening in Spain, the Italians in Africa, and Mr. Hitler helping himself to any country he wants, there'll be no choice soon. He pours the dregs of the tea onto the ground between his booted feet. He's got Austria already, and it won't be long before he's looking for more. I can't see Mr. Chamberlain standing up to him, you know. He's full of hot air and appeasement. That doesn't work with bullies. We need to throw the first punch. Well, I say, we don't want a war again, but you're right, Claude. Only one way to stop a bully. Aye, says Claude, like die slug, you've got to stand up for yourself. I don't reply. I'm not proud of putting die slug in hospital. That's probably where he picked up the TB. Not even a bully deserves that. Been a strange couple of years, Hobart, says Claude. Claude's dog pops his head out from between the blankets, resting over Claude's feet. Hello, Pip, I say. Didn't even know you were there. Oh, he likes it in there, says Claude. Nice and warm for him. Can I ask you something, Claude? I don't know why I said it, but it just seemed right. Ask away, Hobart, ask away, he says. Did you know about Mrs. Cooper? I ask him. There's a long silence. Sorry, I say. I shouldn't have said anything. No, it's all right, Hobart, he says. When you say, did I know about her, I suppose you mean about her being my mother. I don't reply, but we make eye contact. She told me about 15 years ago, Claude says. We'd been drinking elderberry wine by the fire on Boxing Day, And she just came out with it. I have something I need to tell you, Claude, she said. You may not like it, but you need to be told. It's been a secret for too long. I don't like secrets, and I'm not ashamed to say it. In fact, it makes me very proud. I thought she was going to say something about the war, says Claude. Claude Abraham Cooper, she says. She looked me in the eyes and held my hand. Claude Abraham Cooper, I am your mother. Well, I dropped my wine on the hearth, I did. Smashed the glass and elderberry all over the floor. Never told anyone else. Only her auntie and an old friend of hers knew anything. Billy O's mother, I say. What about her? Replies Claude. Mrs. Cooper's friend, I say. Is that right? Says Claude. Oh, Mrs. O'Brien, of course. That's right, I say. So I guess it was Billy O who told you then, says Claude. Yes, I say, after Mrs. Cooper died. I thought you knew, says Claude. Didn't feel confident to ask, though. Sorry, I say, I should have said before, but I didn't know how to. It's not a problem, Hobart. I was content with knowing for myself, and I certainly don't mind you knowing. We talk about Mrs. Cooper for a few minutes, and Claude starts to call her my mother. And I wonder if he's called her that before. Never knew my father, though, Hobart. She never told me that I never asked. Never found the right time. Never got the chance in the end. Some things are best left unsaid, perhaps. Too painful for her, I don't say anything. Would have liked to have met him, though, says Claude. Even just the once. I stare at Claude and breathe a little heavier. His expression changes. My God, Hobart, you know, don't you? You bloomin' know. I say nothing, but my breathing gets faster and I can feel my heart beat. Who told you, Hobart? Who told you? Was it... Billy O, I say, in a subdued tone, before he finishes his sentence. It was Billy O told me, the same day he told me about Mrs. Cooper being your mother. My God, Hobart, is he alive? Can I meet him? I shake my head. Long gone, I'm afraid, Claude, long gone. Well, tell me what you know, man. Don't keep me in suspense. Who is it? It's complicated, Claude. Not easy, Carefully, I begin to repeat what Billy O had told me at Mrs. Cooper's wake, and Claude hangs on my every word as I explain about my father's friendship and their relationship. The colour drains from his wind-wrinkled face. He stares open-mouthed as I explain about Mrs. Cooper getting pregnant and him being secreted off under cover of darkness to live with her auntie. I stop talking and Claude stares at me. There is a protracted silence as he digests what I have told him. You're my brother, Hobart Ackerman. You're my brother. Well, we stand up, and he embraces me almost as hard as Daisy Cooper held me when I returned from Germany in 1918. I don't know whether to laugh or cry, he says. his voice faltering with the emotion. I have a family again. I have a brother. Oh, thank you, Hobart, thank you. You are a brave, honourable man. Thank you. He holds me by the shoulders, then kisses me on the forehead before leaving the shed and sitting on the ground with his back leaning against one of the beech trees. Pip appears from under the blankets and follows him loyally. He holds the dog in his arms before lighting up and drawing on his clay pipe. I don't feel I should disturb him, so I pick up the old garden fork and start to turn over the sods in the raised bed, which will soon house the onions. I dig alone for several minutes while Claude smokes his pipe under the tree and stares across the allotments towards the back wall of Mrs. Cooper's garden. I get lost in the digging before I become aware that Claude is next to me, heaving the heavy sods of earth into the wheelbarrow and breaking up the soil with the side of his shovel. We dig together without speaking until the entire bed is clear. Then we wedge our tools into the fresh soft earth and stare down at the fruit of our efforts. That'll do, says Claude. Enough digging for one day. Enough digging. We put the tools away in the shed and he ties a piece of string to hold the door fast. I'll come back and cover the spuds up before dark. Thanks for your help, Hobart, he says warmly. I'm thinking of going fishing on the Cothie next week if you fancy it. He says Brinton and Glass had a salmon up there on Saturday. Ah, sounds great, I say. Wednesday, probably, says Claude. Well, count me in, Claude. We can sort it out at Howard Stag night on Friday. Here we are then, he says, and raises his hand as he walks towards the back wall of Mrs. Cooper's garden. I watch him throw his bag over the wall and then scale it before disappearing into the garden below. Tom Slob is sleeping on the ground next to his cold frame. I smile to myself as I pick my way around the allotments through the wildflower field of Teaglass Farm back to my cottage. I leave my muddy boots outside and light the fire. What would my father have thought, I wonder to myself. Probably for the best that he never knew. Probably for the best.